some crazy technical difficulties. Hi, Martha Bolton.
Oh, hey, Vicki, we did it. You did it.
Thank you so much for your resilience, because it really took resilience, didn't it?
Oh, it just, you just have to just not panic and keep doing what you know, and always go, like you said, go back to the whole thing off and start over.
That's what it is. It's that for some reason I couldn't see Martha, and we tried everything to get her camera on, and all it took ultimately was to restart the damn computer. So the lesson learned is to always do that first. It worked. So hi Martha. I think we both need a drink. I don't drink, so that won't help.
Or a nap.
Or a nap would be good. So what have you been doing today? Have you done something fun that's offset this?
Well, today has been an interesting day, so this just kind of helped with that. We're traveling, so we're in Ohio right now, and trying to find a place to pull over to do the Zoom was quite an experience. So
wow, well, thank you so much for doing your traveling.
Oh no, I mean, it's my pleasure. And I feel bad that we made them wait a few minutes, but hopefully we'll have a great time. And
that's right, and all will be forgiven. And bad dress rehearsal, good show. That's what they say. So we'll just hope that
it's just like show business.
Whoops! Oh my goodness! Now oh boy! Now we got that going on. All right, that's over. Yes. All right. So Martha, are you traveling on book tour? What are you guys doing? Are you personal traveling?
I have a play that is. I write musicals. It's for musicals. And I've got one that they're having a VIP night tomorrow night. So that's what.
Tell us about your. I'm so excited about this. I lead a writer's workshop, and one of the women is writing. Angel is writing a Broadway musical, and we're very excited about it. We've been doing work. She's been workshopping it. Tell us about your musical. I love this.
Well, we started writing it. Writing musicals I think it's been about 12 years now. Something like that.
Who's your writing partner?
Well, I have two others and myself, and it's Dan Postema, and he's the producer. And then also Wally Nason, and he's the composer, and I write the scripts. And we just started doing it. We started with our first one, and we've done 13. And they're set in Amish country.
I've been to the Amish country many times.
Have you really? Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
Well, they're set there, and they're playing now in Sugar Creek, Ohio, and that's where we're heading. And then they are also in Bluegate, at the Bluegate Theater in Shipshewana, Indiana, and then they're also in Florida, and they are in Pennsylvania at Birdenhand, Pennsylvania, and those are 4.
Birdenhand is where we stayed in the Amish country. And we had the best family style fried chicken.
The food is amazing. The food.
So now, do the Amish? They won't go to the show.
They do it. They do attend, but it's mainly it's about the Amish,
right?
And we always have an Amish character in the script, but then it's for tourists, and there's as those are big tourist communities.
Oh yes.
So the tourists come and they enjoy it, but we definitely have Amish attended, and also they work at the hotels, and so we're right in the middle of Amish country. And what we do is we have either the Amish character is in an English setting or vice versa, and it'll be whichever world, and sometimes we blend the two worlds, but we'll do it sometimes in the Amish world and then sometimes in the English world, but they always cross over.
And so is this something, is it kind of like I'm sure you've seen Witness with Harrison Ford.
It would be compared to Witness, right? And they have, in fact, what's playing right now in Sugar Creek is Josiah for President. And it's a novel that I wrote, and then we put it to music, and it's about an Amish man who gets kind of pushed into running for president, and it's against his will. So there's this struggle back and forth between him and this congressman who it enlists him to run. And then it's, the premise is, what if an Amish man ran for president, and what if he won? And so that's the premise of the whole musical.
Wow.
And it's been playing now probably about 10 years. And
wow.
We bring it back, and we've got other plays that are based on Beverly Lewis, who's a Amish writer, and Wanda Brumstetter as well. So we've got their plays that we're doing. And then, like I said, Josiah was based on a novel that I'd written. And then we've got 13, and they're playing in these different communities, and they play year round. And it's a lot of fun, and the people just love the experience of going and seeing their life played out on stage, and there's music and dancing, and
now have
it's a lot of fun
changed with the Amish? I haven't been there in about probably 25 years, but I didn't think that they partook.
Well, they'll attend. Now, as far as being involved or being in them, or
no, of course, right?
Still, there's but they do come. In fact, our executive producer Mel Rigsicker,
mm-hmm.
he was Amish, and he runs the hotel, the whole. They have the hotel, they have several theaters, and he has a lot. He employs a lot of Amish. And he has a lot of Amish family that's there, but he is no longer Amish, but he certainly has his roots.
So are there levels of Amishness? So because my understanding is that they stay within their community. They don't use public transport. They don't use traditional and
there are definitely different. Each community, they have their own rules, they have their own bishop, and they, there's varying degrees of their separateness. But in this situation, they have attended. I mean, it's mainly tourists that attend, but we do have Amish come and see it. And we always treat them in the script and in the music. We treat them with tremendous respect. And it's a positive experience for them when they come, and they love it. And we're very.
Is there ever the occasion, like in Witness? Sorry for interrupting. I'm excited about this. Is there ever an occasion where the Amish and the whatever we're called romantically intermingle?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It has to. There's rules that we respect and go by that in the script, and then when the plot takes it a different direction, then there's consequences, and there's stress and the conflict and all of that. So all of that's covered, and then it ends with a good ending. And but we tackle a lot of different subjects, like with the Amish man running for president, which goes against their beliefs as well, as far as getting that involved in politics, but he gets trapped into it.
But wait a minute, they're not supposed to have their picture taken. How does somebody run for president?
We handle that too. It's on the posters, it's an artist's it's sketch of him that's on the posters. It's not him, or it's just the word, but he has to deal with his bishop over the issue, because he gets in trouble and he really has to make a sacrifice to run. When he decides that he will run, he's going against the Amish culture, but that takes the story, and there's, it takes you on that journey of what it would be like if an Amish man ran for president.
So now the people that are going, the tourists that are going, they're in the Amish country to experience the Amish country. So
Right.
they're going to learn about the Amish lifestyle, I assume, by seeing your musical while being entertained.
Exactly. And they do learn. Every plot is different, and we always, cover a lot of what the Amish believe throughout the script and the music. And the tourists learn that way, but they're entertained, and it's an enjoyable story, and there's always humor.
Well, you're a comedy writer. Yes, of course, there's humor. Well,
So-
I hope it's dinner theater because they have the best food.
Well, it's not exactly dinner theater, but there's definitely restaurants on the property by the theater, so they can eat and then come to the show. But we would sure love to have anybody come and see it. I think they'll enjoy it, and especially now with an election year, it's kind of fun to watch an Amish man. And we have the debates, and we have, so there's a lot of comedy in all of that, with Josiah trying to run for president. So it's entertaining. And then the other stories, we have all different kinds of plots where the Amish girl, the new one that we are opening this year.
It isn't a presidential election year.
Well, right, it's an election.
Okay,
Yeah, right,
yeah.
right.
Don't confuse the blondes, because I had to stop there for wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had the president because of the play, but yeah.
Right.
But the new one we are opening in Shipshewana
Mhm.
here shortly, in a week or two, is called Dear Soldier Boy, and it's kind of loosely based on the Dear Bob book as far as the letters. And it's an Amish girl that even though they don't get too involved, she decides that she wants to do something to help. And this takes place in the 90s. So she decides she wants to help with the cause. They put up she works in a cheese shop, and they put up a poster that's asking for people to write to the military. And so she decides that she wants to do that, and she does it without her father knowing about it. And then that her letters get complicated because she ends up with 3 of these GIs falling in love with her, and they don't know. She doesn't tell them she's Amish, and so it goes. In fact,
I like this. I like this.
One of them's the son of a general, so he's from a real staunch military family, and doesn't realize she's Amish. So it's a comedy. And
so now, do the Amish sing and dance in your musicals?
well, it's the actors that are playing.
Well,
Amish.
no, I
Yeah,
understand,
yeah.
but playing Amish,
Yeah.
but they sing and dance.
And we do it in a very respectful way. Like there's one scene in one of the plays where the husband and wife do a waltz in the privacy of their barn, and so it's that kind of a thing. And then sometimes they'll dance with the group, and a lot of times it's like they get pulled into it. like the group is dancing, and then they'll pull the Amish one in, and
right.
And so there's a little hesitation and whatnot, so we try to handle that all as respectful as we would like to do it, and they would like us to do it. So
That's fabulous. Well, let's talk about how it's been impacted by COVID. The people who watch this show, I'm a little COVID crazy. I just went to my very first event last week. I went to the Hollywood Bowl outside for the first time in 2.5 years, almost 2.5 years. How has COVID, the pandemic, impacted your theater? I mean, this has been a play that's been going on for 10 years. So I
Right.
assume you were dark for a while.
we were dark, and then we did some that were, when it started opening up a little bit, Then we did some plays that only involved like 2 characters or
Mhm.
3 characters. So there wasn't very many, and they would stay apart on stage. And um, so we handled it that way for easing back into when they opened up. And there's still people that will attend, and they'll still wear masks and whatnot when they do, and that's their, that's perfectly fine. And then there's others that don't, but it is slowly coming back, and people are getting out again, and
Because I would imagine tourism was way down for
oh yeah,
quite some
yeah,
time.
it was, it was it was very depressing. It all just kind of came to a dead standstill, but I think it's picking back up, so we're excited about that.
And so how do you feel in the midst of the pandemic, traveling and doing all of that? Are you fine with all of that?
Well, you have to protect yourself as much as you can, and I definitely, it was scary. It was a scary time for sure.
Mhm.
And you try to protect yourself in groups and stay home when you needed to, and you don't want anything to happen to yourself or any of your loved ones. So it was scary.
Have you avoided COVID all this time?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
far,
me too.
I haven't. Yeah. Yeah, and I've been around it because people in my house have had it, and
boy.
I'm physically compromised. I'm in that category.
Yes.
So I was really lucky. My husband had it, and some of my kids had it, and it just. I don't know how. Maybe I did have it, and I don't realize I did, but.
Well, that is, but
I
I'm
was-
knocking on wood for you before I'm spitting through my fingers, and may
Yeah.
your luck continue. Martha, you are so prolific. So I am imagining that during the pandemic, you probably wrote 30 books. For those of you who don't know, Martha's written 88 books, and probably more since that number was published. I can't even and all of these musicals on top of it. I have and television shows out the wazoo. I have no idea how this is humanly possible. I have one book. It took me 13 years to write it, but okay. What did you do during the meat of the pandemic when we weren't doing anything? What did you do? You probably wrote 3 books. What did you do?
Well, I think it was during that time that I was definitely finishing up Dear Bob and working on that, because that released in 21. And so in 20 I was finishing that up. I also during that time I broke my arm.
Oh no, how'd you do that?
I tripped over the dog leash and just slammed. I think I went airborne. I'm sure I did. And slammed onto my shoulder, and it broke it in 2 places all the way across my humerus bone, of course.
Oh.
And so I
You're
had
humorous. Okay, that's fitting.
I spent part of the year recuperating from that, but I was still writing. We took advantage of that time to get ahead, and we've got several musicals ahead that we have.
Several musicals ahead. Eileen Angel, if you're listening, don't listen, turn this off. Several musicals. Oh my gosh. So, okay, let's talk about, I lead a band of writers, women who write. And if this was any other time, I would have invited you to my living room, because I had a literary salon called Women Who Write. And many celebrities like your Bob Hope, Carl Reiner read here, and Norman Lear. And I know wonderful. You know Norman, and I would have loved to have had you here to read from Dear Bob. But what is your daily discipline? How do you do this? What's your day like, Martha? A typical day when you're not traveling.
Okay. I love to get up very early.
What time is that?
Well, it's whatever time I wake up, whatever time my eyes wake up, and it's usually 3 o'clock is often when I get up. And if I get up at 2, I'll still get up and start working. but I like to get up at 3. 3 is about the time I usually just automatically wake up on my own. And
Wait, and what time are you going to sleep to get up at 3 a.m.?
I usually like 9, sometimes 10, but if I get like 5 hours sleep, then and if I'm laying there, I don't typically just jump out of bed. I will lay there, but if my mind is going and I can't shut it off, then I figure I might as well be working, so I'll go ahead and get up and start working. And then if I'm on a deadline, then that kicks in as well, because I got to get the deadline done. But this is my typical day is I start about 3 a.m. and just work whatever project I'm working on. And I do like to do like several projects at a time. So I'll just advance it so far. And then when I feel like I'm done with that one, for the night, I'll advance another one and just keep like shuffling between them until it gets to the polishing place. And then that you kind of focus on one thing at a time. But that's, I'll work until breakfast, and then might do something. We go out or do something, shopping or whatever. And then I'll come back and work some more, and then work into the evening, and then go to bed, and then it starts all over.
So there's a lot of hours in your day that are devoted to writing.
Oh yeah.
This is more than a full-time deal.
Yeah. I work a lot of hours. And then even when you're in the car or whatever, you're still thinking of ideas, and then you write them down on pieces of paper or bank receipts or whatever, and you're writing these ideas down. Because if you don't, they're gone. If you don't write it down and get it down on paper, sometimes you lose them. So I've disciplined myself to always write it down, and then you got to put them into the computer or whatever. And
that was my next question. Do you write on computer? And
yeah.
And so transcribing from your notes and getting them into the computer. And
right.
Here's my setback. When I write, when I come back the next session, I reread what I wrote. I'm guessing you don't do that. You must keep plowing forward. You can't possibly go back.
Well, when it gets to the polishing part, I reread it and reread it and reread it. So I'm constantly improving it. And sometimes you reread it just to fill your brain back up with where you're at. So where you're at in the story, and where you're at in the article or whatever. So every time you read it through for that purpose, you're always changing things because you want to make it better. And or you get a new idea and you go, oh, that would work in there. And so you're always reading and improving and changing, and then it comes to the point where you figure you're done. It's ready to send off. So
have you ever watched a television show? You don't have time for television. How did you write for television? You can't possibly have time to watch television.
I do watch it, and I watch comedians. I'll try and watch a lot. I love comedy, so whenever something catches my ear or interest or something, then I'll take the time and watch that. And it's for professional reasons, but it's also to make you put you in a good mood. Is
there anything that has your attention lately, that any comedy that you are enjoying or have enjoyed recently? I'll go on YouTube, and different comedians you watch, and I love that some of the up and coming comedians are great, but I watch a lot of the YouTube videos where it'll show a scene from an old show that you remember laughing at as a teenager or as a child, or just these legends of comedy. I love to watch the legends of comedy and study them. You could really educate yourself by studying the legends. Okay, so how did you come into this? So I know you started writing very young as a girl. Were your parents literary? Did they instill that in you?
They weren't so much literary, but they both had a great sense of humor. And my dad had a real dry wit, and my mom was always, coming home with jokes that she had heard at work and telling us.
What did your parents do? Wait, and where was this? Where did you grow up? I don't even know.
I grew up in just outside of LA. I spent all my life out there until about maybe almost 20 years ago. We moved to Tennessee, but before that, it was all Los Angeles. I had gone to school out there, and my mom was a buyer for a department store, and my dad was a carpenter. But they just had a great, just view on life and a positive. It was a tough life. Life is always tough for everybody, but they got through it with a lot of laughter and faith, and it's, whatever came their way. But
were they big readers? Did they instill that in you, or was that something
no, I
took
don't
on?
think they were so much readers as far as that. I guess that was just something I had from a young age. I loved stories. I loved writing. I really loved writing. From the first time I started writing, that was just what to wake up in the morning and write, and to write at school or write when nobody's asking you to write, which is
okay. So I want to know about this. So
yeah.
Was it the accolades you got for your writing? Was it the experience of writing itself? Was it both of those things?
I think it was the potential, what you could create. And I love accolades, that was very validating for me. And I don't know how far I would have gotten without accolades. So whenever anybody said something good like that, it was always kind of a private feel good moment. It was like, oh my goodness, somebody, my teacher, I remember my teacher in junior high reading some of my work that I had turned in, but he was reading it out loud, and I was in the back of the class, and I recognized the words being my words, and he was being very complimentary of it. So just those moments that just feed you creatively were just, wonderful takeaways. But the process of writing was just inside. I loved the process. I just loved it. I loved getting the idea. I loved putting it down on paper. I loved playing with words and seeing, well, if you move this word over here and you move that word over there, it sounds better or it's funnier. And just learning all of that, and to sit and take a topic and then write, what funny thing can you say about it? Especially, when I started writing for Bob, and and even when I was writing, for female comedians like Phyllis and Joan Rivers.
And Joan Rivers, yes, we're going to talk about them.
And you take the topic of whatever it was. I would study their act, and whatever the topic was, and then you see how many lines you could come up with under that topic. And same with Bob. And it didn't seem like work. It was so
okay. We have to talk about this because you don't know this about my husband, as I call him. My ex-husband is a comedy writer, and he was David Letterman's head monologue writer and wrote for Jay Leno and Bill Maher. And so he does what you have done, which is write jokes for other people, make them fun, right? Be the funny behind them. And I know what his process is. He also was a comedy teacher. He was my comedy teacher, and he teaches people how to write a joke, how to be funny. Now, how did you learn that? So did you learn to craft comedy by listening? So were you watching TV as a kid? Were you watching these acts? Were you listening to records? How did you learn and how did you learn to speak in their voice, right? Because Joan Rivers is very different than Phyllis Diller, who's very different than Bob Hope. So how did you learn to write comedy?
Well, I started, in growing up, I loved to watch the old shows, the comedy shows. I loved comedy shows. And then I
So
would.
were you watching the variety shows and the talk shows, or were
I
you
was
watching
everything funny?
everything? Mhm.
And it wasn't because I'm going to be a comedy writer. It was just I loved it. And I would study subconsciously. I was studying how they wrote a joke or how they said a joke, or all of that. And I just loved it. And when I started doing it, when I was 14, I did a gag they had a contest to write the gag for a cartoon. So I thought, well, I'll try it, and then tried it, and they printed it. So, it was another validation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got into roasting. I was a church secretary, and I started roasting the pastor like a Friars Club roast.
I'm sure
then,
it was cleaner than a Friars Club roast.
Well, yeah, definitely. But it was, I was learning in that, you're learning how far you can go and what things to joke about.
Would you insult the pastor?
No, never. And I never.
So it wasn't like a it wasn't like a real
mean roast, because in my opinion, if you're gonna roast somebody, there has to be a tremendous amount of respect and love for that person, and that's why you're honoring them.
Right.
So I would know my boundaries of just having good fun, and if the person of honor is not laughing, then you're not really honoring them.
Right.
So they should be laughing and having fun and laughing at themselves, but in a good way, in a good-hearted way. And
can you give us an example of how you could write a joke about a pastor for a roast that would be funny? And can you think of one?
Yeah, well, there was this one church that I had written for, and it was for their baseball team. And they had told me that I could joke about the pastor wore a toupee, and that I could joke about that. And I wrote some jokes about it. And then I was still a little hesitant because I, at the banquet, I was, are you sure I can joke about this? And they assured me that I was safe and all of that. So when I got up to do it, one of the lines that I could just remember off the top of my head was, who can forget that game when, and then I said the pastor's name, when he slid into second and his hair went on to third.
That's right.
And he laughed the loudest of everybody. So then I knew
fabulous.
I was home free, and I just kept going with it then after that. But and in fact, when he got up to accept his award, he took his toupee off and tipped it. So it was a fun night.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I got known for that, and different churches would call me to come roast their pastor, and I just got into the habit of playing around with the different personality quirks or different situations and seeing what could make it get the funniest response, get the loudest response, and it's usually a surprise. It has to be that the audience doesn't see it coming. And somehow you've taken them and you've gone made a right turn when they were expecting you to go straight.
Right.
And and I learned that. I self-taught that.
That's what I was going to ask. So you self-taught. Did you study comedy at all? Did you formally study?
No, just from studying. I bought all the comedy record albums, and I read.
So who were you listening to when you were studying?
Well, I was listening. Yeah, I had them all. I had Bill Cosby's records. I watched all the Jerry Lewis movies. I loved The Honeymooners, and Lily Tomlin. I loved her work, and had her albums, and just kept listening to them and laughing and studying how they did it, and to see that little twist or that little something that they took. And I love to be surprised, so if I saw it coming, then it would be less satisfactory for me. But
do you find, Martha, that when you make yourself laugh, that's the winner?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And usually it's at 2:00 in the morning or 3:00 in the morning. And if you break out into that's that, you know, and it surprises you that it just jumped into your head,
Right.
and you get that belly laugh, then you go, okay, that's gonna work, because it made me laugh out loud, you know.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
And so while you're learning this, while you're self-schooling without realizing what you're doing, do you want to be a stand-up comic? Is that part of it?
no, I was doing the roast, so I would stand up and do those,
Mhm.
but it was mainly, I didn't realize what I was learning for. I just loved it and was learning, but now I look back and I could say, well, that's what I was doing. I went the path that, you know, all of my practice was taking me, but I was just doing it because I loved it. And then I read a book.
Were you earning a little, how old were you working in the real world? What were you doing?
At this time, I was probably in my 20s,
Mhm.
and wasn't making a living, but I was making money, as far as like going out to the mailbox and finding the pink envelope from Joan Rivers.
Okay, but now
And it
wait,
always-
you didn't just go from watching the honeymooners to getting the pink envelope. You had to
no.
do
Well,
something in between. So did you
Yeah.
have any jobs in that time
No,
while you?
at that time, no, I sent it to her, sent her material, and I sent Phyllis Diller material as well.
Okay, so
And-
how did you do that as a young woman outside of LA? How did you know what to do? How did you follow a business path?
Well, I just had it in my head that, you know, I just had confidence that, well, maybe I'll send it and maybe they'll like it. You know, I didn't know. And I
You
found out
handpicked Phyllis Diller and you handpicked Joan Rivers?
because their style, I liked their style, because I did a lot of housekeeping jokes and family.
And you were a
jokes.
young woman.
I was, but I had I had 3 little kids in my 20s, but between the, yeah, so I had I had a lot of material. And then I also knew people that I always had that self-deprecating humor for myself. And so I had a lot of that in me that I could write about, you know, hating to exercise or eating or whatever. So I had all those same topics, and I thought, I figured that maybe I'd have a shot, because it sounded like me, you know, my style of I would do that when too. I would
So Martha, would you take things that were happening in your life and then put them into Joan Rivers' voice or into Phyllis Diller's voice? Or were you able to leave it in your voice and they liked that? How did that work?
Well, I had to learn their voice, because that's important.
Yes.
You have to do their voice. And that came from, first of all, I had listened to them enough to know what the voice sounded like. So if I had wrote a joke and it didn't quite sound like Phyllis, but it sounded like Joan, then it would, you know, I would send it accordingly. But you have to learn it. And how I really learned it was by what they bought. When I started seeing a pattern of what they bought, then I knew, okay, I'm nailing it here. And for whatever reason, you know, these didn't make it, but these did.
Do you remember any of the early jokes that you sold to Joan or to Phyllis? Do you remember any of the early ones?
Yeah, some of them, I tan the easy way. I just wait for my liver spots to connect.
That had to be Phyllis.
Yeah. And then let's see, trying to think of some other ones.
Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I love it. So,
yeah. I just thought of another one. I'm a lousy cook. For years, my family thought mold was a frosting.
So now okay, so you're a young mother, you've got children. You're also writing books at this time, I'm guessing, because you don't get 88 books if you're not doing that all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So you're writing books. What is your daily writing comedy discipline like? Like, I'm going to write 100 jokes today, or I'm going to write,
Well, and that is what I would do, especially when I started writing, and I connected with Gene Parrott, who was a staff writer on the Carol Burnett show. And I had read his book, and this is after I had been working and selling. And his book, we had a lot in common because he wrote for Phyllis, I wrote for Phyllis. He used to do roasts, and I did roasts.
Mhm.
So I just wrote him a letter after I read his book and said that we had this in common. I didn't expect anything. I just wrote to tell him and how much I enjoyed the book. So he then invited me down to see a taping of Mama's Family. And so when I went down there, I took a scrapbook that had, at the time too, I was also writing a newspaper column. And
of course
so
you were.
I had this
and 3 magazines. And
well, I was doing magazines too.
of
but
course you were.
so I had all this stuff in a scrapbook. And after the show, we went to a restaurant, and I had him look through my scrapbook, and the poor guy, it was this big, thick scrapbook, and he went through it page by page, and he was reading it, and he was so encouraging. And he said, "You really need to be writing for a sitcom or something." And so he's the one that pushed me to, you need to be writing 30 jokes a day or 25 jokes a day. And so he set that as a goal, and then I just kept,
And how would you do that, Martha? Like for Gabe, he would sit down with the newspaper. He was writing topical jokes because he was writing for Letterman and Leno and stuff. So he would sit down with the newspaper and he would craft jokes based on the news. So the dishes weren't changing. The cooking wasn't changing so much day to day. How would you come up with 25, 30 new jokes a day on life as you were living it?
Well, things would happen in the kitchen often, a lot of the time. So it just kind of, a lot of times the jokes wrote themselves, or you're sitting there in a chair and you're looking at something, a pile of laundry or dust in the corner or whatever. And then you just let your brain go to the extremes and see where you can take it. Or you hate to exercise, which I did. So I would write a lot of jokes, about exercising, and like one of the jokes I had was I do 20 jumping jacks a day. Well, half of that I just clap. But you get it while you're exercising, and you're thinking, I hate this, and so your brain goes to, what can you say funny about it? And then you're right, those were a little harder after a while, after I had written hundreds and hundreds of housekeeping jokes, how to come up with new angles and whatnot, although life continues to give you new angles.
Right.
But the topic, when I started writing for Bob, then it was topical humor.
Okay, so now how did you segue from Phyllis and Joan to Bob Hope? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, with Bob, what happened with that is when I connected with Gene, he had asked me to write a couple of spec scripts for Mama's Family.
Okay, now wait a minute. How did you know how to do that? Because that's a completely different kind of writing.
Well, it was, but I had, in the early years, I had done playwriting, and so I was already doing that. So when
also self-taught.
Yeah,
self-taught.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I self-taught myself. I got books on script writing and self-taught myself how to do that. So I wrote, and at the time that I connected with him and he asked me to do that, my typewriter wasn't working. And so for a quarter,
typewriter, we were back on the typewriter.
Back on the typewriter. Well, I was on the typewriter years after the computer came in. I was still doing typewriter, but I finally switched over.
Correct to type in whiteout. Now that's
oh man, and you'd have to, if you made a mistake, if you wanted to move a paragraph that it should be up here, had to retype the whole thing. Yeah,
Oh.
it was it was rough. But so it wasn't working. So for 20 minutes, I went down to the local library and sat and typed 2 spec scripts for Mama's Family, feeding probably $1,000 worth of quarters into this machine.
Wow.
That's, I mean, I was so excited about it though. And I didn't let the not having a typewriter working stop me. I thought, well, I could go down there and feed it quarters and type it up. So I did, and I got it to Gene, and he loved my work, was very complimentary.
Wow.
But what happened is the show got canceled at that time. It ended up coming back, but at that time, that window, it got canceled. So he had gotten it to Ed Simmons, who was the producer, and Ed had called me and told me that he was going to send, this is before they knew it got canceled, that he was going to call me in to pitch some show ideas. And so then the show got canceled. And then, so Gene said, well, you want to try writing for Hope? And I was like, are you serious? You know? And so he gave me a topic, and I wrote some jokes on it, and he got it to Bob, and I waited to hear back. And then one night my husband and I came home from a function, and he took the babysitter home, and the phone rings, and it's like 11 o'clock at night. And sure enough, it was Bob Hope. And he told me that he loved my work and started calling me ever since. And I ended up becoming his first woman staff writer. So.
Which is crazy in and of itself, because it's such a boys' club. And it's also, I don't know about for Bob Hope, but the late night shows are so stuck up about Harvard writers, Yale writer, like they're so stuck up about where you were educated for you to write their comedy. So the fact that you were able to do this as a woman, not with that kind of education, this is beyond everything. So were the men did you work from home and send the jokes? But no, you actually were on shows. You were a staff writer.
Right.
So how did the men treat you in the room?
Well, that's what was so wonderful is they, because I was young, and they all kind of really guided me along, and they were very helpful, and they were legends in comedy writing. I mean, the people that I got to work with I still can't believe it. It's just amazing. And because we had the Carol Burnett show, we had, these are all represented among the writers, MASH.
Wow.
Dean Martin Rose, Red Skelton. I mean, they all had these tremendous credits. And so when I joined in, it was just a wonderful work. We loved to laugh. Everybody loved to crack each other up. And so it was fun. It was work. It was very much work as far as the amount of material that you had to turn in, because Bob, when he would have a show, he'd have like 20, 25 topics that he would give us. And we would write 20 jokes per topic. So the volume of material was amazing that you're writing, and it's one weekend and you're just writing jokes all weekend, In fact, there was a lot of fast writing too, because he would, not only would you do the TV shows, but you would do, wherever he was appearing. Well,
I mean, if he went on the USO tours, are you guys going with him? How is that working?
If they were in some of us did, and I had three little kids, so I went to the ones if they were here in the United States. But we wrote for him, definitely wrote for him, and we would get calls from wherever he was at, and then you'd write the military shows from that, and then you'd get those to him. and you'd write the political shows and the his television specials, his personal appearances, any tributes. If somebody, you know, friend or celebrity passed away, you do that. You know, we had so many interesting assignments that were just you get the assignment, and then you know you'd call each other and you go, can you believe this? This is what we're doing, you know. But it was fun. It was always fun. There was this one time when he was appearing at a psychiatrist convention. So we all wrote psychiatrist jokes, which, you know, came very easily, and you know, and you're having fun writing it. And then when Bob got to the venue, he discovered that it wasn't a psychiatrist convention, it was a chiropractor's convention. So we had about 15 minutes before he walked on the stage. We had to write all new material for him. You know, it was pretty crazy. But he'd call it all hours of the day or night because of the different time zones that he was in.
Wow.
So there was this one time, one of the writers, he got a call, and it was well past midnight, but he was asleep, and his wife picked up the phone, and Bob said, you know, is your husband there? And she looked over at her husband and just didn't have the heart to wake him up yet again for another, you know, midnight assignment. So she thought, she hesitated, and then she finally said, well, no, he said he was going to be with you tonight. So there was this pause, and then Bob says, oh yeah, here he comes now.
That's hysterical.
It was quick.
Was your voice for Bob unique because you are a woman? So was your spin on things, or the things you chose to write about, or was it just all assimilated and not different? Well,
it was all him, but I was so trained because I had written a lot for pastors and written, you know, for men as well as for women. So I had got a lot of practice doing that already. Plus, when I look back, a lot of the jokes that I wrote had Bob Hope's style already. So it was kind of an easy fit. And then the topics, I love writing topical material anyway. So it was always fun. And it was always exciting because things were always changing. You had
okay, so now we get into it. So as I said, Gabe would sit down with the newspaper and he would write in the margins based on the stories. Is that what you were doing when you were writing topical? Mm-hmm.
And you'd write words that went with that, whatever it was. You'd write all the words that could be associated with that topic, and then you just tumble it around in your brain until you started seeing a connection. Oh, that would be funny if this, you know, put this word over here with this, and you're constantly looking for that surprise. Mm-hmm. And you know, something that the audience isn't going to see coming, and then it's something really clever, hopefully, that puts these two together, and it'll get, you know, ideally get a good response from the audience. But we always love to share our material with each other too. If we got a good one, we'd call up the other writers and say, oh, wait till you hear this one.
and would Bob come into the writer's room at all, or did he just leave it all to you guys?
Well, most of the time he would, you know, it would be over the phone and he'd give us the topics, but a lot of times he would have a meeting at his house or at his office, either one. And we'd all be there and we'd pitch ideas, especially for the shows. We would pitch the ideas of whatever the sketch might be. And he was a lover of material. He loved to get the material sent to him, and then he would share it when we were all together. He'd go, you know, Martha has something here, or Cy has you know, a good idea here, or you know, this one time he he asked me for a joke, and I said, well, off the top of my head. And Bob says, oh, we're not going to go up there again, are we?
Oh gosh, that's so wonderful. And what was he reading a teleprompter? How, I mean, to do all this material that.
Well, that's the interesting thing about Bob. In my personal opinion, I think he had a photographic memory.
Wow.
Because he used the cue cards for the
Mhm.
shows, of course, for the monologues and whatnot.
Right.
But when he would do his live show,
Mhm.
most of the time it would be, he'd call us up because something had happened in the news in that community where he's performing. So
Mhm.
he'd say, well, they're tearing up all the streets here, so write me some jokes about that. Or the mayor got indicted, write some jokes about that, whatever it is. And so we would give him jokes, and he would walk onto stage with 10, 20 brand new jokes that we just phoned in to him, and he'd just tell them. Now, that's someone that really has an amazing memory. Plus, if you look at the videos of him performing in World War II, he just walks on stage, and the same thing is his writers were giving him the material just before he went on.
Wow.
And because each base, you'd have something different that he'd want to do. And so he'd walk out there, and there's not a cue card, there's not notes. He's just doing it from memory. He's just talking to the boys and the girls. And it's incredible that the mind that he had. And he would call often and say, that joke that about such and such that I did at the such and such convention in 1985, and he could get that for me or whatever. But he knew exactly where he was at and what year it was and where I could find it.
Wow.
Incredible memory.
Did he ever, was he accepting of whatever you gave him, or would he say, no, that's not funny? Or would he rewrite you guys? Like, what was the process?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, if your joke made it, if he liked it, it went as is, and he would deliver it. Of course, his delivery was phenomenal, so that always helped. But he never let anything go to waste either. It would be often that you'd go to a show and you'd hear a joke that you had turned in for last year's show, but he'd pull it out and bring it to that show. So nothing went to waste. And it pretty much, if it was on the paper and it was good, then he would check them. He'd give it a check. So
let's say you turned in 25 jokes. How many checks would you get normally?
Well, it always got pared down. Like what we would turn in would be, you'd get so many checks. Ideally, like on a page of jokes, you might have 3 or 4, and there's 8 on the page, which is cool. And then it would be, and he would deliver a monologue for the television audience. And so that would be about 45-minute monologue. So you'd have a lot of jokes in that.
Wow.
And then that would get pared down to what would be seen on television. It would be the, 6, 8, 10-minute monologue in the beginning. Or so what got, it all the way along, it would get pared down. But you loved it when you heard one of your jokes. We would all stand on the side of the stage and wait for him, him to do the monologue, and Barney McNulty was the cue card guy, and he'd come out with this stack of cue cards, and we couldn't see the cards, so you didn't know when one of yours was coming. But when you heard one, now you waited for the laugh. You always waited for the laugh, and if you got the laugh, then you'd nudge the guy next to you, and say, that's mine, and but if it didn't get a laugh, then you just stood there and wondered who wrote it, but it was fun times. Oh my goodness.
And how was Bob personally with you and with the writers?
He was wonderful. He was very approachable, very, it was like your uncle. He was just so nice. And I was with him 15 years. And in that amount of time, he never said one unkind word to me. He was the
Oh,
nicest boss you could ever ask for.
wow.
And just very thoughtful. When my mother died, he called me up and we just sat and talked about moms. And it's just so thoughtful, and he never took himself, he knew who he was. There was one show we did when it rained on us. We were filming in front of Grauman's Chinese Theater. Remember where the footprints are? And we were filming there, but it started raining and it was going to be an outdoor shot. So he waved everybody to follow him, and he walked down the street to a regular movie theater, and just walked in and said, "We're going to film here." And they're all like, "Oh my gosh, that's Bob Hope," So they let him do it, but he knew that, but it wasn't in an arrogant way or anything like that. And there was this one time when I was at his house and dropping off material, and he wanted to show me. Dolores had just remodeled his office area. It was off to the side of their bedroom. And so he was showing me the office. And then there was this hallway, and it was lined with all these pictures, all these photographs of him with this king and this queen and
God,
celebrity and General Patton, and it just so many all along this wall. And we get down to the end of the wall, the hallway, and he stops and he looks back at all of his life down this hallway, and he just said, "It's something, isn't it, Martha? It really is something." He couldn't believe his own life. He was in awe of everything that had happened in his lifetime. And I mean, we all are in awe of it. It was just remarkable, but he didn't have an arrogance about it. It was, "Oh my goodness, I got to do this." It was amazing. That one moment, I'll never forget the look on his face.
how lovely. And you got to, I'm sure, work with a ton of iconic celebrities who would guest on Bob Hope's shows. What was that? And were you writing for them? Were you writing for Lucille Ball, or were you writing for these George Burns, or I don't?
Yeah, well, and when they came on the show, because he always did a talk spot with them, so you hit their lines and his lines, you'd write the whole bit, and then you'd have it was in the guest list on his show over the 15 years that I was with him. I look back at the names, and it was everybody. It was everybody that was anybody in Hollywood, and he had a whole career of that. It was just from presidents to the legends and what was the most incredible thing is that when he would do a show, often these legends would just show up just to watch from the background, and where we were off stage.
Like, can you give us an example of who just showed up?
Oh, Milton Berle, Danny Thomas.
Oh my
George
God.
Burns. They just drop by. They would drop by. Jonathan Winters. And they were also on the shows in the past and whatnot. But if he was having a show taping, they would just drop in and say, "Hi, Bob, how you doing?" And then when he would go back to his dressing room for whatever reason, they would take to the stage and do part of their act for the audience. It was amazing to see, number one, their respect that they had for him. There was the writers wanted to get our picture taken with George Burns in his dressing room, so we stopped by and he was so gracious and let us take it. But when we were leaving, he says, "You work for the nicest man in show business." Oh, isn't that a nice tribute?
That's just lovely.
It was amazing. But yeah, everybody was on his show. Everybody from the highest in music today's
Like, did you have, I'm having this vision, I don't know if it would really happen, where like Sonny and Cher on like people like that, and like I'm thinking,
well, they before my time, they were, but
I think I have a memory of it,
yeah,
but so like
and he has done parodies of them as well.
So like what, like, and would you write those parodies as well?
Well, when they would come on the show, yeah, absolutely. We did everything that he needed, whatever he wanted. We would write it. But just, I mean, you name it, and you can't believe that they're on the show and you're interacting with them and getting to, and the phone calls that you got to make before the show to find out information for the talk spot. And so in a day you would be calling, 3 major stars and then calling Bob back, and you're like shaking your head. You just can't believe it.
Did Bob ever get, sorry for interrupting, did Bob ever get starstruck? Was there anybody who kind of, well, because he knew them all and he moved in that circle, but
he knew them all. I mean, probably presidents, he probably was definitely starstruck. I would assume he would get not nervous, but an excitement, and he would want to do well, like when he would go on the Tonight Show or go. So we always,
and so you wrote his sets that he would,
that we would get several calls during the day, before he would go on to those shows for different ideas that he would come up with. Give me something on this or give me something on that.
So what was that like, Martha, when you would write something for Bob and he'd be sitting there with Johnny Carson and he's saying your line? I mean, that has to be a thrill beyond a thrill.
Every time you heard one of these stars, and I still remember, when I heard Joan Rivers on the Tonight Show, and she did one of my first line that I had heard her do, and I had sent it in, and I didn't know she had bought it yet until I heard her say it, and I was like,
do you remember
goodness.
it?
I need to look that up to say I know.
It's okay
to get that, so I know. But I remember distinctly recognizing it, and then sure enough, I got a check, later.
And did Johnny laugh?
Oh yeah. And then there was another time when he did a joke with President Reagan, and Reagan did a big laugh, and I was watching it on the news. I didn't know it was coming, and I watched it on the news. I'm like, oh, that's my line, So that was a big moment. But he ran in such an amazing crowd and treated everybody equal. He really did. We would always have Christmas parties or different events.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one Christmas party. It was at one of the houses. And everybody was socializing and eating and whatnot. And Bob had gone to the bedroom where they were watching the football game, and he sat there in a chair, and there was one of the guests was so mesmerized that he was that close with Bob Hope that he just stared at him about 3 or 4 inches from his face. And he was just staring, and Bob was so gracious. He never backed away or nothing. He just knew the guy was doing it, but he just was so gracious. And at those parties, we would have, not only would we have a guest list that was incredible, and we would have all of the people that were on staff and connected with him and their spouses or
right,
family or whatever. And he would also have his gardener, and he would also have his cook, and he would also have his driver. He just loved people and didn't treat anybody different. Everybody was special to him. It was really, it was an amazing time in entertainment, and he was the one that was connected to everybody. He was connected to everybody. Talk about just, being a game changer. He certainly was.
So let's talk about your book, Dear Bob. Bob Hope's wartime correspondence with the GIs of World War II. Why now? How did this come to happen now? Because Bob's been gone a while. You worked for him in the 80s and the 90s. What resurrected this for you at this point in time?
Well, see, that's what I love about this book. This book, we started working on it when Bob was alive.
Oh.
So he's very much a part of it.
Oh.
And what happened was Linda had known about the book, the letters.
So Linda Hope, his daughter, is the one that you wrote this with, yes.
And she had grown up with the letters in the house and had always been curious about them. And then she also...
Before you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you just give us a quick backstory? How did Bob start this whole thing with this? How did he start the USO tours? How did he start this whole part, this huge part of his life?
Well, his producer had come up with the idea of taking his radio show out and maybe doing it at a base. And so Bob didn't quite...
Was he a soldier?
Who, the producer?
Bob. Was Bob a soldier?
No, he when the war broke out and he first he did the show on May 6th, 1941 at March Field. He was invited to go there by, his producer arranged it. His producer's brother was in the military there, and that was kind of why he was wanting him to go do a show there. But Bob just fell in love with that audience.
Was Bob fighting age when this was happening? Was he soldier material at this point?
Well, he was late. He was born in 1903. So this was in 1941. So he was his late 30s. But he loved that audience. He was so just blown away by that audience. And so he, was wanting to do more and more of that. But then when war broke out, when they bombed Pearl Harbor, then Bob wanted to enlist. But Roosevelt felt that he would be better, his talents would be better served if he just kept the morale of the troops up.
Wow.
So Bob took that assignment on, and I don't think Roosevelt knew who he was getting when he asked Bob to do that, because Bob took it a step further than anybody would have taken it, and he ended up doing 50 years of military shows, and up to the end of his life. His last military show was when he was 87 years old, and he's going in and out of helicopters and flying as close to the front lines as he could get, and ducking sometimes the same incoming as the soldiers are. And he's 87.
Wow.
How many 87-year-old people do you know that would do that? And
none.
He was, they may want to, but they, just logistics, they may not be able to. And he couldn't do enough, and he would have kept on going. He would have he would have still been doing it. Nothing.
And so how did these, when the letters started, I assume as soon as he would do a USO show, he'd start getting how many letters was he getting during the war?
38,000 letters a week. Yeah.
Wow. What?
Yeah,
and he couldn't possibly answer these. So how did he have what was that?
Well, he had a secretary, Marjorie Hughes, who did a fabulous job of collecting these and keeping them in great shape. And he was a major star when this all happened.
Sure.
He was already a major star. And for him he took time out of his own celebrity, and it didn't matter. He did it in his off time. He would go and visit the troops wherever they were at, wherever.
Wow.
He couldn't wait to do it. That became his mission. It became his lifelong mission.
Wow.
And it became his love. It got into his heart. I think after what he saw, which we know what he saw in the different hospitals that he would just, he made sure he visited the hospitals. He made sure he visited, he made sure that he ate with the troops. He made sure that they had their best seats in the house, and they're right up front, and especially the injured ones. He brought them, they'd bring them up in stretchers, and he just gave everything he could give to them, and wanted to do more. They captured his heart. They got in there, and that was such a big part of his life. And he's spent 5 decades doing it.
It's just unbelievable. So back in the day when he was getting 38,000 letters, was there like a machine spitting out responses? And how much involved was he in actually writing back to people?
He was very involved. In fact, when you're, reading through the letters,
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's his voice. You could tell he's the one writing it. Now, she organized it, and she probably, no doubt wrote some, but he answered as many as he could. And he remembered, here's that memory, that fantastic memory.
Right.
He would remember the person, the soldier, where he saw him, and, what the soldier had said to him. And it's just amazing that he had that recall, and it meant something to him. He would remember letters that he would receive from the parents, and he would ask the questions that he would, the back and forth and whatnot. He knew.
So if people would come up to him at one of his live shows or whatever, and he would be able to place this.
Yes.
Wow.
It was incredible to watch, and the respect that the different veterans, when they would come to the shows, and you could just tell the respect, the mutual respect. He had respect for them, and they had respect for him. It was incredible to watch, but he really, he cherished those letters. They were special to him. And so when Linda had grown up with them and had done a high school report on them, and had always been very interested in them, and would sometimes put them in the shows, different shows. That she was a producer of many of his shows. Mm-hmm. And so when I found out about them, I talked to Bob, and I asked him, I said, have you ever thought about putting these in a book? And he loved the idea, but he said, I don't think I can go through them again. It was so close to his heart, because the letters are very, very, they're open, and they're very raw about their injuries and the things that they had seen or things that had happened. There's some that are very funny, and there's many that are just thanking him. The gratitude just comes through these letters. And so he suggested that I talk with Linda, and we see, what we could do. So we talked, we met, and we started working on it way back then when Bob was alive. And then, as what happens in Hollywood, you get, this other project, this other deadline is coming, and so you've got to put that aside. But we never forgot about it. And a few years ago, I happened to, after Bob passed away, I wasn't sure where it stood. And so a few years ago, I got an email from her that said, would you like to get back on that book? And I was like, oh my goodness, would I? So we started picking it up from there. And by this time, the letters had been moved to the Library of Congress, had been donated to them. And so I started going up to, I had done a lot of work already with the letters when they were at his house in California. But now I had to finish it up at the Library of Congress and went there and finished it. And then I would work on the manuscript, send it to Linda, and she'd make great suggestions. And then I work on it again, and we went back and forth and back and forth. And then the University Press of Mississippi came on board, and then the book came out in,
Wow.
we were hoping it would come out. It was supposed to come out the year in 2020, but it came out in 21, which, it was still, I think people after having gone through 2020, it was they were looking for hope, and the book hopefully provided it.
Have you, I have no doubt. Have you heard from anybody whose relative's letter is in the book? Or
What's funny is one of the letters, one of the photographs of a nurse dancing with Bob, and it's a real recognizable picture when you see it, because she's having the time of her life, you could tell, and he's having fun. And her daughter wrote me and said, "That's my mom," so that was really, really super cool. And we've had, a few others connections and whatnot. So it's so fun to be able to share that with the world. We're both just so excited that it's such a piece of history. It's such a wonderful piece of history, and to learn about the war in the voice of the GIs themselves.
wow,
Is just incredible. And then to hear Bob, and it has Bob's letters back to them, so it has the back and forth between them, and the things that the soldiers would send him, they would joke around with him, and they would send him prank gifts, prank gifts, and he'd joke right back, and they'd ask him to adopt him and to adopt their whole company. And it's just the back and forth between him and the soldiers is just wonderful.
and it's so lovely because letter writing is such a lost art form.
It is, yeah.
And it's just something we just email everything. And I'm moving, and I found a letter yesterday that Billy Crystal wrote me in 1984 when I did a Saturday Night Live with him, where he did Buddy Young Jr. for the first time. And yesterday my son went and saw that show, that character on Broadway, and I found the letter with a picture of us. And it was like, and a letter addressed to me with a stamp on it. We just don't do this anymore.
No, and what a loss. Because it's not quite the same an email,
It's not the same, but, because the other person didn't touch it. A letter, we touch it.
Right. Yeah.
They touch it.
Right.
There's
and it's all in their
that.
writing. It's all in their writing. And it's just wonderful.
That's a beautiful, well, I'm so excited about this book. And before we go, I just wanted to talk for another moment about books that you've written. Your titles kill me. Didn't My Skin Used to Fit? Cooking with Hot Flashes. So are you like an Irma Bombeck type, writing about your own domestic experiences?
Yeah, she was a real influence on me as well. I remember reading her books and being all excited about the possibility of writing a book someday like that. And I take my whatever happens throughout my day and have some fun with it. Like the first time that I was offered the senior discount at a fast food restaurant. And how devastating that was.
That's horrible.
You're thinking you look really cool and young, and they offer you the senior discount. So
yeah, for me it was at a movie theater. It was like,
was it?
God. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
You gotta laugh. You gotta
laugh. So of the 88 books, how many of them are nonfiction about your life? And do you write fiction? Well, you do with the Amish musicals.
Right. Those are all fiction. And then I have written 2 novels. I was always not afraid, but just put off writing novels because it just seemed like such a big job. And and then I finally got to a place when I got the idea for Josiah for president. I thought, well, I'm gonna write this and see, maybe this is the book, because I had so many of the point, the outline was all in my head, and I had it fleshed out pretty well. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just write this. I had written it as a screenplay first, and then each step I had all the pieces. So I thought, well, I bet you this, maybe I can do this as a novel. So I did that, and then we turned that into a musical. And then I did another novel called The Home Game, which is a musical as well. And I like, but it does take a lot of your time as far as, a novel, because you have to be immersed in it for, a good period of time, and not get lost with your characters, because you're juggling everybody, so it was a lot of work, but it was a fun experience. I'd do it again. It was fun.
Well, I'm in awe, Martha, of all of every bit of this. As a writer, I'm like, okay, I have to work a lot harder. But what an amazing career you have. And so do you still write all through the day and night?
Yeah. I do. And I that's the one thing about writing, is that there is no age limit. There is no, you could do it. You could just keep on doing it. And most writers do. They go well, into the sunset. And it keeps you young, I think, because you got to stay up with what's people are talking about, what's trendy, what's
Are you still writing comedy?
Yeah, but I usually put it into books or musicals, or that sort of thing. I mean, once in a while I'll write for other people.
I was going to say, do you still send jokes to comedians? That
not as much as I used to, but if I get asked, sometimes I will. If if it's something that I can, if it's in a period of time where I have some free time, then I'll do it. But I'm so excited though about what I'm doing right now. Is that's what's taken most of my time, is doing the books and the musicals and
so
all of that.
Is there a book that you are working on right now? Of course there is. There's probably three.
I would really like to write my own personal memoirs of my writing.
Well, yeah.
So
that's a story right there. That sure is.
So I want to, that's kind of moving to the forefront in my mind, to get that all written down. So.
Well, I hope you do, Martha. This, we had a little trouble getting on the air, but I'm so glad that we persevered and it worked out. How fun is this? How wonderful are you? And what a career. I'm like, crazy. So it's Dear Bob Hope's wartime correspondence with the GIs of World War II, and it's available in real bookstores, on online bookstores. You have a website, marthabolton.com, where they can access your other books, I assume. And
yeah, it sends them over to different bookstores or Amazon. There's also, they could get it at bobhope.com/dearbobmore. And then that.
Okay, well, I think if they Google Dear Bob, it's going to come up, right? And they're going to find it.
It'll come up. Yeah.
Well, fabulous. Thank you so much for doing this, Martha. I got like a whole hour plus of your writing time. I'm sorry. I feel guilty now.
This regenerates me. That it reinvigorates me. So I enjoyed it. It's always fun to talk about. As writing is a lonely life, so you love to talk writing with other people. So that's
excellent. Well, thank you so much, Martha, and I look forward to reading the book. Thank you so much. See you soon.